Protocol having been established, good evening, everyone. Come on, come on. As a teacher, when you stand in front of your class and they're not ready for you, you have to stimulate them. So I might very well have to say, stand class, hands up, down, out, stretch, take a deep breath. Good evening, everyone. Right. We're here for serious business. And when we're here to deal with serious business, then we ought to be very responsive. So I don't want to see those drab-looking faces and so on. Come on. I'm very delighted to be here. But just one simple correction, and that is, I'm not the president of the Guyana Teachers Union, but the general secretary of the Guyana Teachers Union. I'm president of the Guyana Trades Union Congress, so we might have gotten that mixed up. I don't want to have any harsh feelings when I have to return to my union to perform duties there. Anyhow, education reform. Chris, I want to thank you for setting the stage. I stand here in the capacity as a trade union to take you on a voyage through the eyes of the union as it relates to education reform, with specific reference to the professional aspect and how this will impact positively the reform that we are so longing for. Ladies and gentlemen, I know when you hear the word union, it signals first money, better working conditions, industrial actions, and so on and so on. And yes, you are correct. But let me say to you that the mandate of the trade union is far wider than that. And I need to remind you of an older saying which says, and I quote, a saying that by now it has been abused and misused and so on. But it says, and I quote, "Where there is no vision, the people perish." End of quote. And I would go a little further to say, this is a story of change, managing change, and the vision to know which direction one should go in the future, especially in these challenging times. I'm saying all of that to say that research have shown and proven that countries are better able to achieve sustainable development, whereby ensuring that the provision of education to its people stems from nursery to tertiary level. Therefore, it is easy to conclude that education is critical to the sustainable development of our people and this country. It is even more critical when unions, and that is the teachers' union, because we're talking education, is allowed to be a part of educational reforms at all levels. We cannot talk education reform when we want to sideline the union. We cannot talk education reform when we only have the union at forums just to say that they are present. These unions, or the teachers' union, must be allowed to actively participate in strategic decision-making relating to aligning the education system with national, economic, political, cultural, social, and technological developments. If we are honestly discussing the various perspectives in education reform with a view of developing the professional aspect, we must encourage or allow a number of ideal inputs which will seek to modify the desired outcome. Education reform, on a more serious note with relation to the profession, must be ready to embrace the following key pillars with specific emphasis on the practitioners. We cannot talk education reform when there is no serious desire to deal with the professional or the academic aspect and upliftment of the practitioners. We cannot talk education reform when we keep doing what we have been doing since 1923 and we want to do it in 2018. We have to keep moving and adjusting to the times as we go. We cannot talk education reform when we're still asking those practitioners to labor in terms of writing notes of lessons and labor in terms of doing schemes of work, and when we're in the days of technology. We cannot talk education reform seriously. We cannot talk education reform if we are going to have 1- and 2-day workshops, which we hope to create miracles with these practitioners so they can return to their classrooms and transform the learners that they're in charge of. We cannot talk education reform if these programs that we are going to engage in and use up a whole lot of monies on when they're not being certified, or we're not using them for some upliftment for the practitioners. We cannot talk education reform, and these programs I'm talking about, we are saying that they should have merit, whether financial or non-financial. If you're going to use some of them and you don't have the money, then let's add points for promotion and something else and something else. We need to encourage the practitioners. We need to prepare them and build them. We cannot talk education reform when we keep downplaying and demoralizing and doing all sorts of things to the practitioners who we expect to carry out the work we want them to do. You see, in this business of education reform, if we're seriously talking education reform, we have to go and relook a number of policies that we have. Many of them are outdated, and they need to be divorced and separated from us at this time. We have to go to the table, put our heads and minds and hearts there, of course with the union involved, actively that is, to sit and look at some of those policies that we have with a vision of reviewing and making them relevant. We cannot speak education reform when there is no form or there's just little consultation with the practitioners when we want to implement policies. We cannot speak education reform when every time our practitioners go to a head teachers meeting or some seminar or some workshop and they're burdened down more with a whole lot of secretarial duties and they're still expected to administer and perform as head teacher in the schools or as teachers. We are in the days of technology, and like my colleague said before, we have the cell phones, we have the laptops, we have so many gadgets that we can use that would make education reform effective and that would make learning effective. We cannot talk education reform if opportunities are not made available. On the coast, our teachers are exposed to most of the facilities. But what is happening to my brothers and my sisters in the hinterland? And we're talking free and fair and equal opportunities. We cannot talk education reform when we are not considering the revamping of the training that is given to teachers at the Siripota College of Education. Ladies and gentlemen, there's an old, outdated code of ethics for teachers. We cannot talk education reform if we're not busy about revising that document. We cannot talk education reform if we're not seriously into engaging other institutions, tertiary institutions, whether locally or afar, in terms of marrying them so that we can look at best practices and we can adapt and modify to suit our situation here. If we're seriously talking education reform, then the need for all the talking and the writing and everything else must stop now, and we should start walking and have the actions happening. Last but not least, we cannot talk education reform if there is no vision of revamping the respect that these practitioners once used to have. If we're talking education reform, then this profession must be respected as one of the most noble profession or one of the best profession in the entire sector. We cannot talk education reform when there is no view and there is no need and there is no review of looking at the remuneration package that is being offered. And I left that one for last. If we're seriously talking education reform, then we seriously need to look at the remuneration. Because in that way, we are going to be able to select the best minds, best and qualified minds. And of course, when we have them there, then we can seriously start talking of persons being satisfied and persons wanting to give of their best, commitment and the dedication. You will see them flowing. We cannot talk education reform when the facilities that are available to practitioners who leave their homes on the coast and venture into the hinterlands to perform duties and the conditions are not right. If we're seriously talking education reform, then my brothers and my sisters, let me remind us that the only thing that is constant is change. And if we want to develop and we want to seriously have education reform, then we have to first start thinking of the development of our human resources. I thank you.